And greetings. Happy Monday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on BlazeTV, radio, and podcast. I am Steve Deace. He is Todd Erzen back. Good to see you again. You didn't go anywhere. You were here last Friday.
No, it's pretty chill this weekend, yeah.
Yeah. So, not every week. I guess you guys just can't, win conference championships in the Erzen household every single week, right?
Going to try to get a national championship this weekend.
Just going to mess around and go for a national championship. I hear you. Aaron McIntyre's over there as well. Did you mess around and go for a national championship this weekend, Aaron? Or?
Certainly did not.
I did 6 hours of yard work on March 2nd. And I mean, this is the earliest spring cleaning yard work I've ever done, so.
I've been thinking about doing that, but the waste management doesn't actually come around and pick up compost bags until like late April or May. And so it's like, well, what's the point?
Really? So if I put mine out this week, they won't pick them up?
At least not where I live. They don't come until like late April.
Okay. I wasn't aware of that. But here's the thing too, though. June 2nd, I don't want to do that for 6 hours. March 2nd, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I enjoy doing it. Getting out, getting some heat. Was almost 70 on Saturday. Getting a good sweat going. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
It's a psyop on yourself, yeah.
Yeah, in a way, yes. Not all psyops are created equally, I guess. Of course, the show brought to you by our good friends First Cup Coffee Company, a Christian-owned patriot coffee company that doesn't just stand for the same values you do, but they also make one hella cup of coffee. They've got a flavor for every freedom-loving American. And if you want to try it today or you want to try it again, don't be like Aaron. Don't go back and forget the promo code. All right, save the 10%. Firstcup.com is the website. Use the code DACE to save that 10% at firstcup.com. And if you subscribe, you'll save an additional 10% for the life of your subscription. Firstcup.com, promo code DACE. All right, coming up at the bottom of the hour, we're going to get an update from our colleague, Steve Baker, who, of course, reported to the feds on Friday. We talked to him right out of the courthouse. Any update on, I checked with Steve over the weekend. There was some hope that the video that we are working on was going to be released here by the time he was going to be on our program, but there's been no update on this.
He and I have been in contact. He said if it exists, we'll have it, but we don't have it yet. So.
All right. So we will get an update on him on where his case stands and where the overall January 6th narrative stands. And then next hour, we're going to do Pop Culture Tuesday on a Monday next hour. And it's going to seem like we're discussing a sports story, but we're not. I mean, this is just the backdrop of the real story. We have a theme on the show this year of Dominion. To control what you can control, to influence what you can influence within the sphere of influence and authority that each of us has been given, right? Well, in our own backyard in Iowa, we may have the most celebrated women's basketball player of all time. Certainly, she's on the short list with a Cheryl Miller, a Cheryl Swoops, right? Okay. Yeah. Is it Venus? Is it Venus Leslie? Is that the other name I'm thinking of, maybe?
Oh, it's not Venus Leslie. It's Lisa Leslie.
Lisa Leslie, thank you. And she's now the leading scorer in the history of college basketball. She broke that record yesterday. Well, there has been a lot of discussion. She has one more year of college basketball eligibility. Of course, I'm talking about Caitlin Clark. There has been a lot of discussion about whether or not she should or would go pro. She announced just a few days ago that she is going to go pro. And it looks like she's going to end up, if she's the number one pick in the WNBA draft, as many suspect she will be, that she's going to play in Indianapolis. And I think that this merits a broader conversation about influence. Where can you go that you can change things? Or are things more likely to change you? Right? I mean, the scriptures are very clear that on one hand, we have a great commission to take the gospel to the ends of the earth, but on the other hand, we are not to let the ends of this earth justify our own means. We are not to assimilate with this earth. We are to be careful that we don't let it taint us at the same time. And the WNBA isn't a sports league. It has virtually no audience. It's a political construct. It didn't have to be that way Women's basketball has increased greatly in popularity in the country in the last couple of decades. Caitlin Clark has been a big part of that in the last few years. It didn't have to be this way, but it is. And it was this way from the beginning. I mean, the league is essentially a stomping ground for racial grievance politics, the rainbow jihad. That's essentially what the league is most known for. Case in point, I went and looked it up. Would you guys like to know the difference in TV ratings for the WNBA finals compared to the women's college basketball Final Four last year? Would you guys like to know what the percentage difference in TV ratings for each of those events were?
Oh, it's vast.
I mean, it's to quote a very famous song, it's vast beyond all measure.
Was there even 1 million for the WNBA?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
It's 1,065% more people watched the women's basketball Final Four last year than watched the WNBA finals. 1,064%. Is there another? Can you think of a short of Olympic competition, another sport on this planet where there is that much more audience for the quote-unquote amateur version of it compared to the professional? And I'll tell you the answer. It's no. Doesn't exist. Nowhere else. Nothing like it anywhere on planet Earth. It's because the public recognizes that the WNBA is not a sports league. It's a political construct. They've absolutely unabashedly politicized themselves from the beginning. And so there's very little carryover from that audience. And they've drafted people like Cheryl Swoops, Sue Bird, big stars in women's basketball. They have been unable to turn that product around. And so I have serious reservations about Caitlin Clark doing this. And frankly, she'd make more money in college basketball next year. That's number one. With NIL and everything else, how big of a star she is, she'd make more. Would you say the average salary in the WNBA was?
The top salary is about $250.
Oh yeah, gosh, she'd make maybe 10 times more.
I mean, it's not like her sponsors now are just going to abandon her, but still.
But
she also doesn't take any NIL money.
She could absolutely cash in on that.
She doesn't take collective money.
Yes,
but she has endorsements.
Yes. Excuse me. That's what.
Yeah. So I know these are all different pots and everything else nowadays. So next hour, we're going to discuss this because I think that there is a broader, and I think we're going to have some unique perspectives here. Because I'm looking at it as a dad, and then someone that has, throughout my career, whether it's going on CNN or MSNBC, these are also political constructs. Speaking last year at the University of Chicago Law School, okay? When I've been given opportunities, I have sought to go on offense with my belief system. There have been times I did not. I was invited twice about, 2016? So 8 years ago. I was invited twice to do Real Time with Bill Maher. At that time, we were aligned with Salem, and they had contractually some say on my media appearances. And they didn't want me to, they told me not to do it either time because they thought there was it was just a point of diminishing returns. No one in our audience watched that show. So they didn't think it was worth it to go on there and risk trying to change people's minds. So I had to turn it down. Todd, as we just alluded to, your daughter is at the very least worthy of at least trying out for the Olympic team. She is at that level of athleticism, at least trying out.
She's within literally seconds.
So and she's at a public university, albeit it's in the SEC, but it is still a public university. So you guys as a family are navigating this every single day. Aaron, you're a diehard sports guy, Iowa Hawkeye fan. And we're going to have our good friend Bob Vander Plaats is going to return to the show. He's back from his month-long sabbatical in Florida just in time for spring. And he's similar to Aaron, but also like me, has taken his faith and his belief system into hostile environments in the past. And so where is the line where abandon hope, all ye who enter, right? When do you answer Pontius Pilate? Let's use a biblical analogy. When do you answer Pontius Pilate, and then when are you silent before Herod's palace? That's basically what I would like us to navigate and discuss. And so we're going to do that coming up in the next hour of the show as part of our theme on Dominion this year. But before we get to all of that, here's Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away brought to you by a smackdown, which is exactly what the Supreme Court gave this morning to Colorado's Supreme Court after they tried to kick Donald Trump off the primary ballot in that state, saying he's an insurrectionist. Trump appealed that ruling to the Supreme Court, and this morning, in a rare unanimous 9-0 decision, the court chastised Colorado and reaffirmed that the only entity with the power to remove candidates for federal office from ballots is Congress. Justices Jackson, Kagan, and Sotomayor went on to issue a concurring statement where they affirmed the end result of the court, but complained the decision and its affirmation of congressional authority over ballot access for federal candidates, quote, shuts the door on any other potential means of federal enforcement on how candidates can or cannot appear on ballots. Furthermore, they implied on multiple occasions that Trump is a, quote, oath-breaking insurrectionist. Moving on, but staying in D.C., this news broke late last week. Judges in D.C.'s district court may have improperly applied federal sentencing guidelines to more than 100 people convicted of participating in the events at the Capitol on January 6th of 2021. A 3-judge panel on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals rejected the Justice Department's argument that convicted rioters merited lengthier prison sentences for interfering in the, quote, administration of justice when they stormed the Capitol. Administration of justice enhancements on charges and sentencing is typically reserved for defendants who disrupt judicial proceedings such as courtrooms or grand jury investigations, and the Circuit Court said that doesn't apply here. Defendants who had their charges enhanced unlawfully by the corrupt district judges may ask for newer, lighter sentences if the appeals court ruling stands. Congress passed and Joe Biden signed another short-term government funding deal late last week, which pushes the deadline to fund 6 separate funding bills to later this week and another handful of bills to later this month. House Speaker Mike Johnson says an agreement struck between the House and Senate is a win because each piece of legislation will allegedly be voted on by itself instead of part of some omnibus package. We'll see. Glorified cold update. The year is 2024, and the CDC has finally dropped its 5-day isolation guidelines for those who test positive for COVID. The agency says if people are fever-free for 24 hours, they should return to work and school. Flat eartherism is still alive and well, though. CDC still wants people to mask up for 5 days after their positive test. In the Sunshine State, the University of Florida has fired all staff and positions related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, effective immediately. The axed positions are the result of a law passed last year and signed into law by Governor DeSantis, which bans the state's public colleges and universities from spending money on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And now going to a place where DEI is alive and well, here's outgoing Senator Joe Manchin at Harvard, where he was meeting with that university's Institute of Politics. Here's what happens next.
Joe Manchin, you have sold our futures and you've gotten rich doing it. You sick. How dare you? You have sold our futures.
For those of you listening, climate cultists interrupted Manchin's meeting before one guy was ragdolled into a door like a little female dog. We now go to Oklahoma, where I regret to inform you the He Gets a Super Bowl ad about feet washing has taken a disastrous turn, or something. What you're watching here is students sucking on and licking the feet of allegedly adults in a fundraising event at Deer Creek School District in Edmond, Oklahoma. The school district released a statement after that video went out and went viral, defending whatever the heck that was, saying it was for charity and the students were not actually licking the feet of adults. They were licking the feet of their classmates, because that makes it so much better. Not sure how having students lick the feet of other students or adults enhances the educational experience of those kids, and neither does Oklahoma Superintendent of Public Instruction Ryan Walters, who says his agency is investigating. Moms for Liberty was featured this weekend on CBS's 60 Minutes, and surprise, surprise, Scott Pelley did his darndest to cover for the groomers and frequently accused Moms for Liberty co-founders Tiffany Justice and Tina Deskovich of dodging questions during their interview. Listen to this, though, at the end of this clip.
Dodging questions like those was not an option back in Beaufort, South Carolina. Critics of the book ban said they knew what groomer meant, and they saw it as a threat to people of color and the LGBTQ community.
Learning Chinese today. Today's phrase is, why would you associate that word with those people?
为什么你会把这个词与那些人联系起来?
And that's what happened while we were away.
All right, Aaron's montage is brought to you by our friends over at MD Hearing Aid, it's this podcast. That's one of our partners. And if you're still paying thousands of dollars for hearing aids that don't even work all the time, MD Hearing is an FDA-registered rechargeable hearing aid that costs a fraction of what typical hearing aids cost. In fact, its brand new XS model cost over 90% less than clinic hearing aids. And the XS is their smallest hearing aid ever, fits right inside your ear. No one's going to even know it's there. MD Hearing, founded by an ENT surgeon who saw how many of his patients needed hearing aids but simply could not afford them, so he wanted to do something about it and made it his mission to develop a quality hearing aid that anyone can afford. And the result? MD Hearing has sold over 1.5 million hearing aids. They offer a 45-day risk-free trial with a 100% money-back guarantee so that you can buy with confidence. If you want MD Hearing's smallest hearing aid ever, go to shopmdhearing.com. Use the promo code STEVE. Get their new $397 when you buy a pair offer. Plus, they'll include a charging case for free. That's a $100 value just for being a part of the Blaze. That's shopmdhearing.com. Use the promo code STEVE. Shopmdhearing.com. Use the promo code STEVE. All right. Let's get to Aaron's montage. Let's start at the top. So I wrote a piece for the Blaze over the weekend.
It's 50% true already.
It's 50% true already that what I think will occur is I think you're going to see John Roberts' court link these two cases, the Trump immunity case and the Colorado ballot case. They're going to link them together politically, and they're going to pimp slap different sides on each one of these, so that Roberts in his court, who's John Roberts? John Roberts is, once said Brett Kavanaugh was Karl Rove in a black robe. John Roberts is Mitch McConnell type Republicans in a black robe. And so you have to understand these people are institutionalists, which means, swamp creatures more than anything else. So the fact that it was 9-0, and it should have been, but guys, there's been quite a few things over the years that should have been 9-0 with any plain reading of the Constitution. And how many times were they? Rarely. This is one of the few times in my lifetime I can think of on not a procedural issue, but a constitutional principle issue of existential importance. I mean, with the Colorado State Supreme Court, the precedent that it attempted to set. I mean, I know we make jokes and stuff about a banana republic, if you can keep it, and stuff like that on this show. And some of it's, gallows humor. Some of it is Babylon Bee-esque prophecy masquerading as parody. Okay. This would have officially been an act of a banana republic. Officially. Oh, well, we don't like what he says, so you're off the ballot. Oh. There's a we don't like what he says clause in the Constitution? No. But there also isn't a good ideas clause in the Constitution, or I'm entitled to something that doesn't belong to me clause in the Constitution, or I would like to liquidate your family farm for a strip mall clause in the Constitution. There's none of them. And yet those things get upheld at the Supreme Court and in the courts all the time, right? Or if they get defeated, it's 5-4 with the narrowest defined ruling of all time, lest we draw any sweeping conclusions from it, right? This was 9-0. And on a straight up principle of the Constitution, can you rework the meaning of the 14th Amendment to say, as a court, you have the power to determine who is and who isn't on a ballot? And the answer is no.
Can I ask you a really cynical question? I think you'll dig.
It might head off you might be heading off where I'm going, but go ahead anyway.
Do you think if it was more obvious or obvious completely that Trump was likely going to win, that they would have 9-0'd this thing? Or do you think this has everything to do with the fact that it's maybe a flip of a coin at best, or they know that he's probably going to lose and that's why they feel...
We're talking about the immunity case?
No, I'm talking about this rendering, 9-0. Do you think...
The election.
No, I think the immunity case is what is being foreshadowed here.
Okay.
Well, you could be right.
I'm not
so saith the Psalms. I'm not, prophesying. Okay. I mean, you could be right, but I think this is actually a tell about the other case. And I think that this is, again, this is not a legal proceeding trying to generate a political outcome. These are political proceedings trying to generate legal outcomes. And so if they're political, if they're legal, you just go with the law and you don't care if, people can't even in pearl clutch and, kvetch, right? That's the law, okay? It doesn't scream, yell, do whatever you want, but, we're going to follow the law. If it's political, you're always looking for what's the collateral damage? How do I message this? How can I limit the fallout? How can I present this in a way that makes it seem like the right thing to do? Those are political considerations, right? There's none of the how do I present this clause in the Constitution, right? There's none of this how do we message this clause in the Constitution, right? That's the law. But if we're thinking politically, we think that way. And I think that the fact that this was 9-0 is indicative of what is likely, if I'm right, that they're going to link these two cases. It's indicative of what's likely going to happen later. And they're going to come back to us and they're going to say, hey, remember when you guys said the court did a great job and even look at Sotomayor and Kagan agreed? Now that we didn't rule your way, it goes against your, now we've lost our credibility. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I think this is how institutionalists think. Everything is a posture. Everything is. There's no principle. You see this with the Republicans on Capitol Hill. At least with the leadership, most of my lifetime, and certainly all of Aaron's, there's never a hill to die on. There's never we just can't do this as a society. So it doesn't make sense, but at some point you reach a breaking point and you say something like, we can't let 7.6 million people come into the country in 3 years. Unvetted, undocumented, we can't do that. And so, yeah, it's politically going to be painful to stand up to it on some level, but the greater pain is the principle. When does Republican leadership, whether it's biblical worldview guy Mike Johnson, or it's CrossFitter guy Paul Ryan, or it's chain smoker and I'm 3 sheets to the wind by 1 o'clock John Boehner, when does that happen? Or Mitch McConnell, back to going to Trent Lott,
that would be never.
Bob Dole, okay? Those, by the way, the last 3 Senate leaders. And I think there would have been, the heart surgeon was in there from Tennessee for a while, shortly, right, who turned out to be pro-abortion. Okay. But what would that be? 3.5 Senate leaders in 30 years? In 30 years. Okay. And there was never a moment to say, here and no further, we can't do this anymore. Ask yourself, do you think that the country's crossed a few thresholds in your lifetime that it would have been a good time to just sit there and say, I don't know what the political fallout of this is going to be, but someone just has to stop this and say no, right? Mm-hmm. For Republicans in Washington, at least for their leaders, that moment has never occurred. Certainly, at least not in this century, it hasn't so far. Despite all the cultural decline. We want evidence? It's also in Aaron's montage. A generation ago, 60 Minutes was the most respected and most watched program in all of American television. It might now be the longest running program, breaking the Gunsmoke record. A generation later, it simps for sex predators, child sex predators. A generation ago, no one answer this question out loud, please. Just answer it rhetorically, telepathically, mentally. How would fathers have reacted in a place like Edmond, Oklahoma, a generation ago, if their kid came home and said, they had me suck the big toe of my classmate? How would every father in Edmond, Oklahoma have reacted a generation ago to their child being told that? We all know the answer to this, which is exactly why a generation ago, their kid didn't come home from school to say they were sucking the big toes of their classmates. That's why it didn't happen, because everybody knows how the dads in Edmond, Oklahoma would have reacted. Now in Edmond, Oklahoma, you're like, what is a dad? That's one generation. That's all it ever takes. See it in the scriptures. One generation after Joshua dies, everyone does what is wise in their own eye. We go from choose ye this day whom you will serve to, well, everyone's just going to do as they see fit. One generation, 60 minutes, helping us find pedo groomers in the daycare centers of America, to a generation later placing pedo groomers in the daycare centers of America. It's always one generation. Always. And when a culture lets go of the rope, it goes fast. So going back to this ruling, it is the right ruling. It is one of the few times in our lifetimes, or at least since we came of age politically, Todd, certainly in Aaron's case, that the court, I mean, I almost wonder if there ought to be a rule. Given how divided things are right now, if you bring a case to the court and you lose 9-0, I wonder if it ought to automatically trigger a disbarment hearing. Just at least a hearing. Just automatically trigger it. Like, your case is so bad, automatically license review, disbarment review. Every justice on the Colorado State Supreme Court that attempted this, in my opinion, should face a disbarment review. Should be an automatic calculus that in this era, if you get pimp slapped unanimously by the courts as divided as they are now, you automatically face some form of, pardon the pun, judicial review. It's your own disbarment review. Just an automatic, just to make, it's a little bit like when a cop shoots somebody.
Yeah.
Might even been a clean kill, right? The right thing. But every time a cop shoots somebody, discharges his weapon, it automatically triggers some form of an inquiry, yes. Right? I think the same thing ought to apply here. If you get poleaxed 9-0 at the court, automatic disbarment review. Doesn't mean you should be disbarred. Doesn't mean it. I mean, I actually believe in due process, so we'll give it to you. But there ought to be a due process. You automatically are up for an inquiry review. Fair?
Consequences are good.
And I think the consequences of celebrating this today, I fear we will feel later. It was 28 days ago that the Supreme Court heard arguments, or 25 days ago, I should say, that they heard arguments on this issue. 25 days later, they air a 9-0 opinion. April 22nd is when they will hear the Trump immunity case. If they rule within 25 days, that's May 17th. So that would still give the zealots half a year to put Trump on trial. Even if it's just gaveling it in like a Comey letter the day before the election. Remember, everybody, he's a danger to democracy and an insurrectionist. I mean, the latest they're going to rule on that is June 30th. I hope I am wrong, but seeing this thing go 9-0 today, I'm actually more confident that they are going to split the baby in half. This was an attempt to garner credibility for what is to come later. Thoughts real quick.
Does it diminish the severity of the charges against Trump after he doesn't have the immunity option? But seeing this 9-0, do they have to pull back and say, we just can't go full insurrectionist on him?
That's maybe. That maybe is where the other case maybe comes in. And that, to me, might even be the bigger ruling today. Because that's the same panel that keeps ruling against Trump on immunity and everything else. Mm-hmm. You know, Steve Baker's next. For about a decade now, Patriot Mobile has been on the cutting edge of building the parallel economy as America's only American mobile phone company. And if you want to make the switch today, it's never been a better time. Number one, you can stop giving your money directly to companies who hate you. But then number two, you can go instead with a company that has an outstanding U.S.-based customer service team, gives you access to all three of the major networks. And when you're a member, you can switch anytime you want, free of charge. And they have some special incentives as well. For example, if you're a veteran and first responder, let them know when you go to make the switch. They've got extra ways to say thank you for your service. Everybody is eligible to get a free activation with the offer code Steve, my first name, when you go to patriotmobile.com/Steve. That's patriotmobile.com/Steve. Or you can call them at 972-PATRIOT, 972-PATRIOT, or patriotmobile.com/Steve. Speaking of Patriots, let's welcome back in our friend and colleague, Steve Baker, who, of course, joined us from just outside the courthouse where he was treated like a common criminal, a traitor by his government on Friday. And now, Steve, we wanted to bring you back with a few days here to kind of just get, just try to have a perspective more of where things are. How did we get here? What does it mean? So Steve, let's start there. How would you answer those questions?
How did we get here? Should we start with that one? Yeah. Look, I was one of those guys that was interested in what was happening at the event on January 6th. I intended with myself and another writer who you know to attend that event together, to cover the event, to write about it. I was going to do man on the street interviews. I brought my tripod, my microphone, my camera, and that was the extent of how I expected my day to unfold, other than I would be really cold in January in D.C. And so that was it. That was our entire mindset. And then, of course, there were scheduled events at the Capitol that day that we also intended to go and look at and watch and listen to. There were other stages set up over there for speakers. Some Congress members were going to talk. And so as we started the process of heading over to the Capitol and then eventually arriving there, we began to notice that something was wrong. Something was going on. I said to my colleague, let's go check this out. And we ran up to the West Terrace, and my life changed. I began shooting video at that point of what was taking place on the battle line, the West Terrace battle line. That story moved eventually up to the upper West Terrace. I followed the story there, and then that story eventually moved inside after several hundred people began to flow through an open door, which I was never there when those doors and windows were breached. I just saw an open door with hundreds of people moving in, and I got in that line and videoed that entire spectacle as it unfolded in front of me, and eventually spending 37 minutes in the Capitol. I exited the Capitol to actually record the definitive video of Ashley Babbitt's body, because I believe she was already dead by then, being extracted on a gurney by paramedics and with surrounding SWAT team protection, and then loaded into the ambulance. And then my day was still not over, because I eventually did some interviews on site there with some media companies, and then I worked my way back to my hotel later in the evening.
I did an interview about you on a national radio network this morning, and I want to share with you what I said to them about you and your case. I said that I think it's the fact that you have just earnestly sought what is the truth here that makes you a target. You have not tried to turn this into a cottage industry, that everybody that was there on our side were completely innocent snowflakes that were completely and totally, they were entrapped into acting out. Everybody there was a victim. You've been on this show. If you've pointed out instances over the last year or so where, that person, they acted like a thug. That person, they rioted. They should get arrested for that. I've seen you on social media push back at times on sort of the cottage industry of every one of these people were victims. And I think that, to me, is why you're dangerous, Steve. That if you had just said, hey, I'm just going to do this, I'm just going to create a counter narrative for clicks here and build my engagement and following off of this, and everybody's a victim, and everything the other side did was bad, I don't know that they would really care about a lot of, because reading your complaint, much of it is your commentary before and after, not your actions and behavior the day, therein. I think that you're being targeted here because because of your striving for consistency. When you point out things like, hey, your pipe bomber narrative is falling apart looking at your own footage, it stings more than if it was just another engagement clown that's out there trying to build a following, which is rife with all the throughout the right these days. A lot of those people aren't being targeted. There are no threats to the regime. Hey, you guys go out and create your own clown show narrative, compete with ours, and we've got the superior legacy platforms. We'll kill you in a battle of clownish narratives. What's dangerous to them is the truth. And I think your earnest pursuit of that is why you're specifically the one they are targeting here.
Yeah, Steve, one of the things that I really believe, it's not necessarily even what I've already reported that has angered them. It's what they know that I know that's coming. And I don't know if this, in the way they handled this arrest with putting me in, leg shackles and belly chains and marching me in front of the magistrate that way for non-violent misdemeanor defenses. I don't know if that was to send a message to me, because by the way, there is a message there. It's a message to me, and it's a message to the larger, to the country at large, particularly those of us on the right. The first message is that I know, and my attorneys know, that this isn't just the 4 misdemeanor charges if I don't behave going forward and I don't comply with the remainder of what is in front of me. Because what they're going to do is they're going to offer me a sweet plea deal. And after they offer me this sweet plea deal on one of the misdemeanors, the glorified trespassing charge or whatever, offer me a year probation, a $2,000 fine, 100 hours community service. If I just plead guilty to this other one little thing, and it'll all go away. But if I don't do that, they can issue a superseding indictment, and they can jack the next one up with felony charges if they so desire. And don't forget that back in August, I received a grand jury subpoena for my work, and grand juries are not seated for misdemeanor charges. They are only seated when the government is trying to get the grand jury to indict somebody on a felony. So apparently, and we can only conjecture because we'll never be able to see, grand juries are secret, so we'll never know what their deliberations were. But apparently, whatever they were seeking, the grand jury went, no, there's not enough of that there. But, again, show me the man, I'll show you the crime. So I think that this was like, okay, warning shot, we know what you're about to do, maybe you should back off. But look, Steve, I don't know any other way but to hard charge. Just this weekend, my attorneys were like going, because I sent them over a couple of things and statements I wanted to make and a couple of tweets I wanted to put out there. And I'm having to be a little bit more careful right now, as you can imagine, before my next hearing in D.C. in a couple of weeks. But they were like, no, what you're saying is the truth, but there'll be time for that. Keep your powder dry, and we'll get there.
Friday, we discussed that there is video out there that the Blaze, our company here, thinks largely exonerates you. Can you give us an update on the status of that video? Did I describe it accurately?
Yeah, I've already seen a preview cut of what they want to roll out, and I just a matter of fact, before I came down here from upstairs, I went through and made a couple of suggestions of things they actually needed to add to that. There's nothing that I want to take away because there's nothing in it that I'm embarrassed about. You see, the things that they brought up in what they call the statement of facts about things that I said, look, let me just do this for you real quick. It won't take me but a second here to pull this up. But let me read a tweet that was sent out by NBC's Ryan Riley, who wrote a very, unfavorable piece. It's
a very demeaning tweet. I shared it too, but go ahead. Yeah.
Well, no, this tweet right here is quite something. He said that if it wasn't for Steve's language on January 6th before he entered the Capitol, and then after that evening, this case almost certainly wouldn't have been brought. In other words,
So this isn't the tweet where he referred to you basically as a karaoke singer, okay, and not an actual journalist. But yeah, okay, go ahead.
Right. No, well, fortunately, I didn't even see that one. But the reality is that exactly that is he tweeted out and said, if I had not said things before I got to the Capitol, after I left the Capitol, in both incidences off the campus completely, then I would not have had these charges brought against me. So what does that tell the world when we're talking about sending a signal? That means it doesn't matter what you say or where you say it. If you say it wrong and we ever have a chance to use your speech against you, we're going to. And that's what I've told you this before, Steve. I think the first time you and I ever met when I was there in studio with you in Iowa, I told you that this entire thing and most of these trials were about scary words. And if you say the wrong thing at the wrong place at the wrong time, or as somehow in reference you said on social media afterwards, after you went in and took a couple selfies, but then joking on your Facebook live stream later, you said, hey, we stormed the Capitol. Oh, man. Well, that shows intent. That shows what you were there for. It shows that you did, in fact, intend to disrupt Congress and stop the election certification, when you had no such intent at all, because you're just a person that wandered over from the ellipse at the rally where Trump was speaking, and you wandered over, and all of a sudden you saw open doors, and you went in, and then you get out of there, and you say fun things, stupid things, crazy things, whatever your motivation is, but you didn't even know this was going to happen. And yet then you're suddenly pigeonholed into being the quote-unquote insurrectionist that you really, really are. And then they can put these enhanced charges against you. They can jack your charges up. And just for the words coming out of your mouth, you can get additional months or years added to your sentencing.
The broader application of that, I mean, listen, there are things you can say. You threaten a president or a public official, that's a crime. Okay, there are things you can say with your words that are crimes. But then when you do that, you are charged or arrested for those things in the moment, okay? What we're talking about here is in the broader application is, at any point, just your political speech can be criminalized now, provided it fits a certain context of the narrative of those doing the criminalizing. Meaning it wasn't a crime in the moment, like you threatened a high-ranking public official. You personally threatened bodily harm to another person mano a mano in a public forum, okay? That there's no question that moment you committed a criminal act. What we're really talking about are thought crimes. That after the fact, we can accurately deduce your meaning, even if at the moment you said them, no crime was committed, because it goes against or it goes in favor of a certain narrative. That is some scary stuff, brother.
That's exactly right. And this goes all the way back to my coverage of the Oath Keepers trial back in the fall of 22, is I was saying this all the way along, that what they were charging these guys with, what they were trying these guys with, what the government was using as prosecutorial tools against them was just their thoughts and their speech. So much so that I sat down with one of their actually Stuart Rhodes' attorney, and I asked him, I said, okay, let me just get you to clarify the law for me, because I'm not a lawyer. But Stuart Rhodes offered the president, he wrote an open letter to President Trump, and he said, sir, if you will declare or invoke the Insurrection Act, my 35,000 Oath Keepers will bring our weapons into the district. We will surround the White House, and we will protect you. Well, Trump didn't invoke the Insurrection Act, and Stuart Rhodes nor the Oath Keepers brought their weapons and surrounded the White House to protect him. So I said, is that a crime for him to have made that offer? And he said, no, it's not a crime at all. I said, okay, all right, that's the first part. The second part is 1 week after Stuart Rhodes got back home here in Texas, and he was in a parking lot. He had been drinking, and this government, an actual FBI confidential human source, was surreptitiously taping the conversation, and Stuart Rhodes said in the conversation that I wished I had brought my rifle with me to D.C. and put a bullet in Nancy Pelosi's head. I said, that sounds horrible. It's nothing, should ever be said or joked about, but is that statement a crime? And he said, no, it's not a crime. I said, so what he wanted to do but didn't do, what he wished he had done but didn't do, was used against him in front of a D.C. jury to convict him and sentence him to 18 years in prison for what he thought, but not for actions he ever did. Now, I grew up, I'm an old school, classical liberal, libertarian, whatever you want to call it. And, I'm one of those guys, no victim, no crime. And especially when it comes to speech, because that is protected. And especially when it comes to thought crimes.
Obviously, we got your back, brother. We're going to keep following your case, and you let us know what we can do. Okay?
Hey, Steve, I really appreciate you guys have been incredible. And, this morning with Glenn, he told me, there's just no way for me to express adequately how you and the Blaze team have been toward me in this whole, through this whole process.
Well, that is well earned, brother. Well earned. God bless you, man. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Quick thoughts here. Got about 90 seconds.
Well, considering how chilling that conversation was, now consider something even more chilling. How few quote-unquote journalists have spoken up about this. I mean, how there's simply going to be no legitimate. Steve, you've been talking for a long time about our job is challenging me because we can't even have a starting point for agreeing what the facts are to comment on. Mm-hmm. Well, this is that turned up to 11. I mean, you just coming in here and lighting up this microphone. We are this close. Am I going to jail or not? That's the precedent.
I mean, look at any of the three of us, Aaron.
Yes.
We join any kind of conservative protest at all.
Yeah.
And some ne'er-do-well troglodytes turn violent. We don't do anything, but we were there. Do they go back and look at our previous commentary and say, well, you intended to do something, you just did not, so we charge you. Right?
Yeah, this is what I've been saying for upwards of 6 months to a year now, is that right-wing media is going to be next. This doesn't just stop. This doesn't just stop with those involved with the riot at the Capitol on January 6th. This doesn't just stop there. They're pushing the bounds every single day to see how far they can go before there's a significant amount, a tangible backlash to basically doing their best secret police impression. That's where this is going next. Guys, they're throwing pro-lifers in jail for trumped-up charges already. Don't think that they're not coming for us or you next.
Hour 2 is next. And greetings. It is Monday, right? Hour 2. I'm Steve Deace. He's Todd Erz, and he's Aaron McIntyre. Going to be joined by our old friend Bob Vander Plaats here in a moment. You can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. Take advantage of that by either emailing the show, steve@stevedeace.com, or you can find us on social media. You can like me, Steve Deace, on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. Follow @Steve Deace Show on Twitter, Getter, Instagram, and TikTok. If you are a podcast listener, please, if you've yet to do so, leave us a 5-star review, and thank you to all of you that have. You can also hit subscribe, or if you're tuning in via iTunes, that would be follow there. That way, every time we do a new episode, it will show up in your feed every single time. This part of the show brought to you by our friends over at New Founding. Remember when businesses were just about making a profit, providing a good living for their employees, and providing a product, a service that people wanted, and it was just that simple of a transaction? Well, that's not the case anymore. Much of corporate America has been given over to the spirit of the age. That's why we see wokeness, ESG, DEI reigning supreme in that arena. And they want to do something about that at New Founding. They are investing in companies whose founders just want to get back to the original American idea of building inspiring and disruptive companies, the best in the world. One simple question gets asked before they decide whether to invest in a company. Does this country we want to live in need the company this person is building? If the answer is yes, they invest. If the answer is no, they don't. If you want to do venture investing with New Founding, it's not for everybody, but if you're a serious accredited investor who wants to see a more hopeful future for the country, just go to newfounding.com/venture fund and apply to be an investor there. That's newfounding.com/venture fund. Again, newfounding.com/venture fund. Tomorrow also is a big day, the release of my next book. It is book 2 in my trilogy, easy for me to say, of children's books on America's Christian heritage. Releases tomorrow. Why Easter? Jesus died for us so we can live forever is released tomorrow nationwide. You can order your copy right now on Amazon.com. If you would like to get an autographed edition, you can purchase one there at premiercollectibles.com/whyeaster. That's premiercollectibles.com/whyeaster. And if you want a personalized autograph, meaning it's a customized message, we have a very limited supply of these, only a couple of hundred, but you can purchase one of those at signedwhyeaster.com. That's signedwhyeaster.com. So the pre-sales on this have been very strong, very appreciative of that, very proud of how the book turned out. And the first book, Why Thanksgiving, was very successful. So we're hoping to match that again with Why Easter. Just my attempt in my corner of the world to maintain, to restore America's Christian heritage. So Why Easter releasing tomorrow. Gentlemen, let's get to hour 2. And first and foremost, Bob Vander Plaats, it is good to see you, brother. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Congratulations on the Why Easter book. It looks tremendous. It looks like something I want to get for my granddaughter.
It turned out really good. I mean, the illustrations are really what makes these books, of course. And the illustrator did a fantastic job. And I said this when I released the first one. These are the hardest books I've ever written. I mean, the amount of edits that these kinds of books go through, way more edits than the books I write for the grown-ups. Yeah. Okay.
And talking about grandchildren, I'm excited to hear pretty quick with Anna. Any day now, right?
Yes, her due date technically was yesterday. So we are all on pins and needles every time if Amy and I get a text after 10 o'clock, I jump in, you know. But nothing yet. We're all very excited for autumn. No one more excited than Anna. She has reached the point that all first-time mothers get to, which is whatever nerves and anxiety about can I really do this are completely outweighed by we got to get this done. Okay,
I'm excited for you. Excited for her. This will be tremendous.
So we're all very excited, and they told her they're only going to let her go a week beyond her due date before they induce. So one way or another, this week we're going to have a grandbaby.
I love it.
Yeah,
love it.
So we're pumped. We are. All right. I would like us to have this hour. We have, it's been a month or so since we've seen you. Every year, as you know, we have a theme on the show. That's kind of our North Star of, what is it that we're focused on this year? What's the message that's kind of the plumb line that we want to focus on more than anything else for this year? And just looking ahead to this being an election year and how much of this election was going to be fought in the courts long before we ever have a chance to vote. And went our way today. Can't sit here and say we're going to be confident it's going to go our way all the way through this process. And again, that's a lot of but we have no control over that. We
Sure.
cannot control how judges will rule. We cannot control how capable Trump's attorneys are or are not. Okay. We cannot control how much integrity Jack Smith does or does not have. Those are things we cannot control. And so leading up to this point, I wanted us to not waste most of this year, at least on our show. I can't speak for everybody else, but fretting and being concerned when these things,
stuff you can't control.
Right. Like today, this is a newsworthy topic, so we spent a good deal of time in light of the court's ruling on the Colorado case talking about it. But day to day, there's not going to be breaking news. So why exert all this angst on something we have no control over when there are still many other areas and arenas that we could engage in, right? And so that's why our theme this year has been dominion. Where is it that I have influence? Where is it that I have some form of control? And those are the places where we should spend more of our time than on most of the time we spend, particularly in conservative media, on things we have no control over. Mm-hmm. And I got to thinking about this over the last week or so, looking at the decision that Caitlin Clark was determining to make about whether to go play in the WNBA. Now, she has since made this decision late last week. She announced she is going to go pro and not stay one more year in college where she has more eligibility. She became the leading scorer in all of college basketball, men or women, over the weekend, passing Pistol Pete Maravich. You're talking about a record that's going on 50, 60 years old. She's an incredible athlete. She's already, though, largely because she's straight and white, if we're just going to call it like it is, she has already been a lightning rod into a lot of or too much sports media and political media already. We've had very prominent former players, like now she's since apologized, but Cheryl Swoops basically has spent the last year or so essentially saying she's overrated, and we all know why this is happening, and I understand it to some degree. Whenever you are historically a part of a marginalized subculture, and there were certain levers that your subculture used to essentially climb out of that cultural ghetto, for lack of a better description, that people relegated you to, those are kind of our areas. Those are the things that kind of belong to us. And clearly we have a history in this country in the distant past of relegating people based on their skin color to these kinds of cultural ghettos, right? One of the primary means that Black America used as a lever to yank itself out of that pit were excellence in things like athletics. And I go back to something that a mutual friend of ours, that Keith Ratliff once told me, who's a pastor here in Des Moines, and for many, many years that was the president of the Iowa Nebraska NAACP until they excommunicated him for being your friend, basically.
He endorsed me for governor.
Yeah, that was the last straw.
The last straw. He's over.
And but he said to me once, he goes, when I was a young black man, I struggled with why is it that if a young white kid had a picture of Dr. J in full fro back in his ABA days with the red, white, and blue ball, if he's got this poster of Dr. J in full fro in his room, his white daddy had no problem with it. But if I showed up to knock on the door and ask his white daughter and say, hey, I'm here to take your white daughter to the prom, he suddenly has a problem with it. And I'll never forget this. Keith said, I realized that excellence transcends differences. That Dr. J had reached a level of excellence that he had transcended the racial debate in America. That he was just looked at now as an excellent basketball player. And you can think of a Sammy Davis Jr., a Jackie Robinson, several other figures like that. Okay? And what's happening now in reverse in women's basketball, I think, is symbolic of what's happening in the larger culture. I have spent during my free time in the last few weeks watching live the actual games of 1980s NBA All-Star games and NBA playoff games. Right? So this is the sport the sport that has the most black representation of any sport in American history. And guys, I have to tell you, this is another planet. Okay? I mean, this is like another timeline we don't live in now. All right. So most of the players are black. The black folks are singing the national anthem. The conversations are just you would think it's in reverse. Like you would think like they would be the ones still with a living generation that remembers segregation in the 80s. That would have been their parents, and they would have grown up hearing these stories, that this would have been the era that everything would have been about race. All the ads would have been about race. And that, 30 years later, we would get to the point of doing the kinds of broadcasts they were doing in the 80s. It's totally reversed. You see what I'm trying to say? Mm-hmm. Like we're doing the kinds of things, politicizing the sport in light of race, that frankly should have happened 30 years ago, with that stuff still fresh in everybody's mind, but they were looking to move on. Like when Dennis Rodman and Isaiah Thomas attacked Larry Bird for saying he was only good because he was white, the media attacked Dennis Rodman and Isaiah Thomas for saying that. Nowadays, the media would say that, and they have about Caitlin Clark. Hey, she's just a white girl. playing in the Big Ten college basketball. There is a certain level of derision where she is concerned because she's not part of that subculture. This played out with whatever was going on with the LSU women's basketball team in the Final Four last year and some of their antics and everything else when they faced each other. The commercials, by the way, guys, if you really want to get depressed, go watch commercials during 1980s NBA games. And you're like, what in the world happened to where's this country at? I'd like to live here again, okay? Because it doesn't exist now, okay? But my point is, if I were her dad, and she's a grown woman, she gets to make her own decisions. But if she asked me, man, I would have urged her to try to get a 12th year in college. I don't think there's a future in the WNBA. I think it is a political construct. It's not a sports league. I think most people realize this. It has not seen nearly the growth in popularity that women's college basketball has. I went and looked up the numbers last year. The TV ratings for the women's Final Four compared to the WNBA finals, a 1,065% increase in the women's Final Four. Couldn't even get 1 million people to watch the WNBA finals. Got almost 10 million people to watch the women's Final Four. This dynamic exists nowhere else in the world except for Olympics every 4 years, where so-called amateurs outdraw professionals. Mm-hmm. In no other team sport does this exist except here, because people recognize that essentially the WNBA, and I want to make sure our friends at Media Matters quote me correctly here. So let me make sure is it Abigail? What's that chick's name again? I always forget.
Ethel,
thank you. Ethel, if you're stenographing, this is the part you're going to want to copy. All right. The WNBA essentially is a construct to use sports as a means to complain about racial grievance and to promote the rainbow jihad. That's why it's there. It's not there to promote the sport of women's basketball. It's for that reason. That's why it doesn't have an audience. Everybody knows this. Putting Caitlin Clark in that situation, you're essentially saying to her, she has two options, in my view. You will either assimilate into this culture, meaning that you will become our agitprop. You'll become a simp for us, okay? All my best friends are gay. I go to every lesbian wedding in the WNBA, okay? And I agree. I wish I wasn't white, In fact, I'm going to get a tattoo. Not white, unwhite. I got to show that I'm down with the struggle. You're going to do that. Or you're going to be to blame for everything wrong that happens in that league on every one of these debate shows that airs all day long with racialists on ESPN. That's what's going to happen. And it's already kind of happened. We've seen proto versions of this with her in the last year. I don't see a W here. And I think that there is a broader conversation about when and where to engage culture. The same scriptures that tell us to take the word of God to the ends of the earth also tell us, though, not to be stained with, when dealing with unbelievers. Don't get at us. Don't follow their customs at the same time. Okay, I don't see there's a path for nuance here in this league. It's not a successful league. I don't even know what would be gained by I don't think you can make it more mainstream. I don't think it wants to be. I don't think she broadens its appeal at all. Maybe it's minuscule compared to she is a target for politicization every time she plays a second in that league. You can make tons of money playing in college nowadays with endorsement deals and everything else. She doesn't need the money. She'd make more probably playing at Iowa than in the NBA or WNBA. And so, is this a case of exercising dominion, or is this a case of walking into a minefield of rakes you will step on? So here we have Todd, whose daughter faces these kinds of decisions as a high-level collegiate athlete. She's at least worthy of trying out for the Olympics, maybe even making an Olympic team. All right. You obviously have been heavily involved in athletics, but, one of the things you've also done is attempt to take your belief system into hostile environments. I've done the same, Here we have Erin, of course, who's followed her career pretty closely as an Iowa fan and is very well aware of the political skirmishes that have enveloped around her. This stuff did not exist if you go back and watch the ascension of Larry Bird These were not go watch the live events and coverages. These were not the conversations that were being had in the late 70s, early 80s, the ones that we're having now. Okay? In that era, they wanted to move on from the divisiveness into a more unified culture. In this era, we want to go back to the divisiveness. So let's go around the room first and foremost and see, where does everybody stand on this? And Bob, since everybody's heard from you the least in the last 5 weeks, you get to go first.
Well, let me give you some hope. First of all, Steve, you know that basketball runs deep in me as a player, both at the high school level and college level, and then as a basketball coach at the high school level. And all of my boys played basketball. Matter of fact, my friends would say, you didn't give them a choice. And I said, I sure did. I asked them, do you want to eat or not eat? And they chose to eat. And so they played basketball. Our oldest two played high school and college. Our third son played high school and could have played college, but decided he would go to Iowa State University and be a student and close home to mom. So basketball runs really deep. And Steve, since I just got back from Marco Island, let me tell you about a guy that sat with me by the pool. He found out I was from Iowa. And he goes, I need to let you know, he goes, I haven't watched 1 minute of women's collegiate basketball ever in my life until Caitlin Clark. And he goes, and now he goes, I schedule my schedule around when Iowa's playing so I can watch Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark is a target because she is flat out good. She's taken her God-given abilities and she's putting in the work and the determination and the competitive spirit, the competitive fire, and she has transcended the game of women's college basketball to an all-time level to where her road games are sold out. Her home game, who would have thought Iowa Carver Hawkeye Arena, the tickets would be going somewhere between $500 and $1,000 yesterday to get in the arena and have all these celebrities because of Caitlin Clark. And Caitlin Clark transcended collegiate basketball without this political agenda other than, I want to win basketball games, period. So our boys and we had this vigorous conversation about what should Caitlin do? Should she stay in college for another year, or should she go to the WNBA? And where we landed was, you know what? Don't have any of her records have an asterisk on them. That this was the COVID year. This was the COVID. So that's why she scored that many points. You know, like, let her collegiate career be done in 4 years. These are all the records that I set. I won every award possible. And now go to the WNBA, and the choice is more about the WNBA than is Caitlin. The Indiana Fever, who's got the #1 draft pick already, they're already selling tickets. There's already a fever around Caitlin Clark. The WNBA has got a chance now to put its game at a whole new level, not on a political agenda or a political construct, but on a basketball platform to where the best girls get to participate against the best girls in professional basketball. That should be their goal. I mean, if you take a look at the political construct narrative that you just talked about, Steve, they have not been successful at it. Nobody watches WNBA. I couldn't even name you a team outside of the Indiana Fever, and the only reason I can name you Indiana Fever is because of Caitlin Clark and them having the #1 draft pick. So I think Caitlin has an opportunity here. But you bet, as a dad, as a pastor, as whoever it would be, I would definitely put guardrails around her and say, you be you. Meaning, you've been good at what you do. You've transcended this game. Do it again at the professional level. And the WNBA would be wise to take her lead versus trying to conform her into something that she definitely does not want to be.
Do you believe the WNBA is going to take her lead?
You know, Steve, and maybe I'm just this capitalist by nature, but I think money is king. The WNBA is getting killed financially. This is the best thing financially that's ever happened to them. But they've never been
in any danger. That's true. But why have they been in no danger of going out of business? Because they're not a sports league. They're a political construct. That's why they're there.
So what I'm saying, though, is that if they want to elevate it, they would be wise to follow Caitlin's lead versus saying this is if it's a political construct, then I think you're right. I think then I think Caitlin has a real decision to make. Do I still want to hang out in this league?
I agree. If it's a sports league, they should follow her lead.
Yeah.
She should be their Michael Jordan. They're Jerry Wester, put her on the damn logo. I don't believe it's a sports league. But Todd, you've got firsthand experience in this as a dad. So what do you think?
Well, it started out as a sports league. and what it's become, if it can become that can be reversed. I take this very seriously. This isn't remotely theoretical to me. The way you've described and you're right, the current WNBA is what Charles Barkley, the way he accurately described the NBA before Magic Jordan and Larry Bird came along. It was a niche sport. It was not publicly cherished, both in the popular imagination nor in the business community. And this is to your point, Bob. Then Magic and Bird came along, and Charles Barkley said, I'm a rich man today because of those guys. And he said everybody wanted to be a part of it, which speaks to, Steve, everything you said about all of the commercials that you've been watching. Mm-hmm. Everybody wanted in. To the degree that Caitlin Clark is capable of doing that, in the short term, I think there's going to be some kind of infusion. Long term, it depends on her continuing to be she has to
excel.
She has to be really, really good still. Yeah. But that's not it. Listen, she went to Dowling Catholic here. She is Catholic. I don't know any specifics about how deep that river flows. But listen, I've already said publicly that she could totally change the game on Save Girl Sports if she wanted to on that issue. College, I can excuse somebody in college. I'm just going to do this thing while I'm still kind of a girl. You're going to be a woman in this thing, and you're without excuse, Steve. And quite frankly, if you're not willing to step up truly in the face of all this nonsense and say enough is enough. There was a woman yesterday who won the 3,000 at World Championship. She had a baby a year ago. That's a real woman. You need to be a part of this. And if you're not, sooner than later, all the demons, whether you have the best intentions or not, are going to hunt you down. And that political construct is going to swallow you up. So I would advise my daughter to go. But I think you know how both of you know how I raised my daughter. It'd be like, are you all in? Because this is way bigger than all the hoops, all the money you're ever going to make. Are you willing to stand? If you're willing to stand.
Let me give you a little bit of hope on that piece. This happened yesterday. I don't know if you guys caught this or not. But when she broke the women's all-time scoring record, I mean, they called a timeout. They stopped the game. It was hugging. It was cheering. It was basketball time. It was Caitlin. Now, she broke Pistol Pete's record on a free throw with like 0.3 seconds left to go before half. But Lisa Bluter said it was never our intent to stop the game because that was not the goal we were shooting. Kind of like those are two different things. It's a men's sport and a women's sport type deal. And Pistol Pete, everybody could say too, yeah, he had 3 years, the three-pointer wasn't there, the freshman couldn't play during his collegiate career, all that stuff. But it was kind of a message of what you're just saying, Todd. There's a men's league and there's a women's league.
Self-awareness.
Yeah.
But that's Lisa Bluter, and I covered her years ago when she was at Drake in the University of Iowa. That's a sport in a sports league. The WNBA is not a sports league.
See, this is where I was wanting to go with my answer, if I could chime in here.
Sure.
So I think administratively, the WNBA, do you think, the last time I checked or the last time I heard, the WNBA is basically a subsidy of NBA owners and franchises. That's how I understand this. And yes, they're fine to pay that subsidy if it means that's basically their biggest virtue signal, in the professional world.
And it's a write-off.
And it's a write-off as well. But do you think any of those owners would not turn down the opportunity to take this from a subsidy to a cash-flowing operation? Absolutely, I think that they would jump at that opportunity. And here's the difference between Caitlin Clark and Sue Bird and some of these other amazing basketball players of the past. Caitlin Clark now, I would argue, is not just a transcendent basketball player. She's a cultural phenomenon at this moment. So I think they're banking. I think administratively, the WNBA absolutely sees dollars in their eyes right now. I mean, you look at some of the pre-sale tickets for the the Indiana Fever, where she's expected to go. That thing could be reverberated all around the country. Come see the cultural phenom. I don't really care so much necessarily about the intricacies of the WNBA. So I think WNBA administratively sees this as a huge opportunity that maybe we could take this into a cash flowing. And then the other thing, though, I think assuming that she stays on this pace of excellence, I think there is the dynamic within the WNBA. My concern is actually not with the administration of the WNBA necessarily being a threat to Caitlin Clark. My concern is with the players, the other players. Okay. I believe it was Michigan when Caitlin Clark set the all-time women's leading scoring march. I think Michigan, I think it was around that time, Michigan's players for their basketball team had a bunch of gifts for Caitlin Clark. That's an amazing show of just camaraderie, respect, and mainly just respect for what they see in Caitlin Clark. I was watching the telecast the other day, yesterday, of the Ohio State game, and Gus Johnson was talking about how the Ohio State players were talking about how they're sick of talking about Caitlin Clark. They want to go beat Caitlin Clark. That's all well and good. In the NFL, do you think a lot of people hate Patrick Mahomes? The players, they hate Patrick Mahomes? Mm-hmm. Probably.
They want to take him down.
They want to take him down.
Sure.
But when he throws a game-winning in the Super Bowl, in the overtime of Super Bowl, they probably still hate him, but there's an intrinsic, I think, rooted sense of respect.
Respect, without question.
For Patrick Mahomes, because he's the best. And yeah, I hate him, but man, he got us this time again. Which impulse amongst the broader WNBA player base do you think wins out? That's my concern for Caitlin Clark. Whether that plays out, I just hate this woman, I'm going to do whatever I can to destroy her on the basketball court, or I'm just going to badmouth all the time off the basketball court. That's my main concern. It's not necessarily with the administration of the WNBA. It's with the culture of the rest of the players.
Go ahead.
I remember Kevin McHale, who played for the Boston Celtics.
We got about a minute.
And he commented, he said, one day there's going to be people going, who was Michael Jordan? Kind of like a diss to Michael Jordan. Jordan's great now, but people will soon forget him. People have not forgotten about Jordan. When Darla and I showed up at the grocery store yesterday, we saw all these Iowa Hawkeye number 22 jerseys on these little girls. You're right. It's a cultural phenomenon. She has an opportunity to bring that game to a whole new level. I think Aaron's exactly right. It's not even the owners or the administration. It's how does the other teammates and the players respond. I think she has shown she's a tough kid. I'm hoping she can transcend this game to another level.
I want to discuss some real scenarios she is going to face. Because, again, I think this is a broader conversation, man. Whether you're trying to stand up to ESG at your workplace, any place at all where you're trying to go against the prevailing winds of the culture, this conversation is what you're going to face. Let's talk about that next. As we sit here today, the lives of too many babies in the womb is still hanging in the balance. That's why I want to talk to you for just a minute about our friends over at Preborn. They need our help. They are an outstanding ministry that is an outstanding job of saving hundreds of thousands of babies over the years. And they do it with they just follow the Bible's admonition to offer truth and grace. First, they confront moms that are considering murdering their children with the truth via ultrasounds that, hey, that's not your heartbeat. That's another person's heartbeat that you're carrying there. And over the years, a majority of the time when the mom hears that, her conscience is convicted. She doesn't go through with murdering her child, and then they show them the grace. And they're there for her with prenatal care, postnatal care, everything they do, both the truth and the grace. All of that is free of charge, provided they have tax-deductible funding from people like us. And you guys here at The Blaze have been incredibly generous to Preborn, and we'd love to keep that going. For their Preborn centers now, if you want to donate, and even with Biden inflation, still less than $30 for one of those ultrasounds today. Just dial pound 250, say the keyword baby on your mobile phone. Dial pound 250, keyword baby, or simplest thing to do, and this is what our family does when we choose to donate, just go to preborn.com/Steve. Again, preborn.com/Steve. All right, let's continue in on our conversation we're having this hour It's Pop Culture Tuesday on a Monday, but when is a good time to invest in the risk of cultural engagement, and then when is there's you do some level of strategic, unless hey, God's saying go there regardless of what the options are, do what God says. But otherwise, if we're trying to say, hey, is there an option of success there without complete assimilation, what is it? I asked our audience on Twitter over the weekend, I asked them a poll question. Here are the results. Have you or anyone you know ever watched any of the following sporting events? 88% said they'd watched the Women's Final Four. Only 10% said they'd watched both. Only 2.3% said they'd watched the WNBA playoffs. Like, that's played out in the actual data and numbers I showed you. And as I listened to what you guys were saying, it seems to me that what we're asking in this particular case with Caitlin Clark is we're asking her to be both Michael Jordan and Jackie Robinson. That, Michael Jordan's famous admonition, Republicans buy sneakers too, he was apolitical his entire career, and you were able to do that. We were not as existentially divided as we are now. The league was growing, as Todd, you said earlier, everybody wanted to be a part of it, okay? And he could be the rising tide that lifted everybody's boats, that took what Bird and Magic established to a completely different level. Today's athletes are not permitted that. I mean, as you like to point out, Todd, they're on the brink. They're doing everything they can to ruin college football, because apparently, every kid's a victim if they're not, millionaires at 19, and they need to be able to transfer whenever they want. Coaches can't leave whenever they want without paying, out clauses and exit clauses and everything else. Well, we're now going to say, in that environment, go in there and just sell a sport that doesn't want to sell. It wants to evangelize. And those are two different things, okay? And so if she tries to stay neutral, it will be, as Aaron pointed out, the other players are going to say, hey, when you come into my lesbian wedding? Hey, where are you going to put on the BLM sticker? Why you got the tattoo? Where's your 37 pieces of flair? Okay?
Or they're just going to be so jealous of her, they'll take it out on her on the court.
Correct. And in a social media environment that loves feeding off of that, a sports bro media environment that loves to feed off of that. Okay? As you pointed out, Todd, there's a whole bunch of folks in Iowa sports media that have made a ton of money covering and ratings covering Caitlin Clark the last few years. Yeah. Though when the battle was to actually continue to have women's sports, were nowhere to be found.
They said nothing.
All right. And so, then you're asking her at the same time to be Jackie Robinson, to go in there and essentially be an evangelistic construct, that I represent a subculture you've rejected, that you've overlooked, that you should allow in, to be more inclusive, to broaden your reach, to get better athletes, better caliber of players. Okay. And that is a tough poll to ask that of any human being at the same time in this environment. And then the other option is for her just to assimilate into it. And if that happens, that'll hurt her marketing the other way. A lot of those kids that are wearing her stuff, their parents aren't going to have Caitlin Clark wearing Caitlin Clark's commemorative rainbow. What the hell is the Indianapolis team even called? You say the Storm? Fever. Okay. The Pride Month Caitlin Clark jersey signed by her, and her best, friend with her lesbian polygamous pansexual relationship. They're not. How many of those same girls are going to be wearing that uniform?
They won't.
And so you're like the Republican who's like, well, I'm going to show I'm not like those crazy conservatives, and I'm going to run as pro-choice. Well, people are like, well, if you're going to be pro-choice, I might as well vote for the Democrat, because they're going to give me more choice. There's no reason to vote for you. I'll be the church that waters down what I think. Well, nobody goes, because you're to tell me all the same stuff the culture does. This is, to me, a trap. I don't see a way out of it, unless you are a person of extraordinary anointing that God is specifically saying, go into that place, all right, as my representative. Short of that anointing, I don't know how you would navigate it. And now I will be quiet and let everybody else talk the rest of the time.
Well, if I can begin, and maybe I'm just too much of a Caitlin Clark fan. I have really enjoyed watching this, because I'm one of those who would have been, I just didn't pay a lot of attention to women's basketball. I mean, matter of fact, it was a guy 2-3 years ago who had season tickets to the women's basketball and the men's basketball at the University of Iowa, and he said, hey, you can have my tickets anytime. He goes, but I'd encourage you, check out a women's game. They're more fun right now than probably the men's game is. That's when we had Luka Garza, but he saw Caitlin Clark coming up. Caitlin Clark, when she goes to a PGA event, not even her sport, the line is for her. not for the PGA players, but it's for her. She has been in a fishbowl. Steph Curry, all the big LeBron James tweeting about her, texting about her, and all these people that showed up at the Iowa game yesterday. And she's been a role model. She's been a conscious role model in her post-game interviews about all these young girls looking at her, seeing all these young girls in the stadium. And what she's trying to do is give it her best, play with a passion, and to show that you really can excel and raise the game to another level. So I'm hoping that she is allowed to do that in the WNBA. Steve, I understand your fear about that being allowed to happen, but I sure hope she says, I'm going to be a role model. I guarantee she's got a lot of people from her parents to other people maybe paid saying, here's the guardrails you need to be concerned about. But if I'm her dad, I'm saying you play the best basketball that you can. And you be a role model for others to watch, but stick to the game of basketball. A lot of us here have talked about leave the sports alone. That's one place where we can go to and just kind of get away from all this stuff instead of always inserting the political agenda. If the WNBA stays there, they do that at their own peril. Because right now, I think you're going to see Caitlin Clark jerseys go off the shelves. You're going to see the tickets, not just for the Indiana, but all the away games too. They want to see Caitlin play. So I hope and I pray for her the best. She's done so much and she's risen the collegiate game to another level. I hope she can do that in the WNBA without making or buying into this political thing that needs to be this way or that way.
Todd?
Well, listen, every possibility is on the table. We really don't know, as I said before, just about her faith in her Catholicism. But listen, she's very well spoken. Most of the time, she's really nice. She's had a couple moments. I mean, she's a bit of a lot of people, the thing they don't like about her is that out on the court, and it's come up several times, she's a bit of a flopper, diva along those lines, which is certainly part of the game. It's not unique to her. So if that potential within the social sphere plays out, she'll get eaten up alive, because, she's not going to be protected like she is out on the court. But in the other direction, there are signs, Steve, that the population at large is not having that with her. You've already mentioned Cheryl Swoops. It happened during the Final Four. They lost the whole hand thing with the gal. I mean, that blew up in that girl's face. Caitlin came out clean on the other side, and it had a lot to do with how she handled it as well. But really, and the last thing, I agree with you on the records. She's not leaving early. I would not suggest her. This is the COVID year. The COVID year is just dumb. Exactly. At this point, it's very dumb. And she's going to make a ton of money. But listen, I hope her family is telling her. Like I sat down with Ainsley before she got involved in Save Girl Sports. I said, look around you. You know that you're blessed beyond any level of understanding. Amen. I'm your dad. Your mom's your mom. We were not you. You came out of this and you can do these things. You and God have got together and say why and what in return must I do? And I think Caitlin must do that. She has a level of talent and joy in this game beyond reason. And I think she owes something back. It's going to take a little time. It's not going to be from the tip off of her first game to be some political radical. I'm not asking her to be that, but to go in there and say, I'm not going to be that. I'm going to offer an alternative. There's people, if she's willing to do it, there are signs. If all the signs are pointing in the direction you're talking about, Steve, I might even be leaning. I just don't think they are. And at the end of the day, we can't. We got to fight back on this in every way we can. We can't hide our light under a bushel basket. I don't even know. She may be listening to this. If she was and saying that they have no idea who I am. Oh, I'm going to put on the rainbow flag the instant I get there. That may be true. I don't know. But we need something.
We're going to find out.
We're going to find out. And
they're going to make sure we find out.
But I wouldn't just do this for I don't do anything just for the money. And I would never advise my kid just to do it. She's going to make plenty of money. That shouldn't be the issue on this.
As much as you're asking Caitlin Clark to simultaneously be Michael Jordan and Jackie Robinson, I think even more so you're asking the pool of players, getting back to the players in the WNBA, you're asking them to essentially put aside the notion they've already been affirmed in, which is I deserve to be paid a lot of money to play in a sports league that nobody cares about. In other words, if you think the NBA is bad right now, and I don't watch the NBA other than the playoffs, because that's when everybody's giving max effort defensively and offensively. That's when it's the most entertaining. With all of these, what is it, a rest night, what do they call it? All these big time players take nights off just because they need to rest their bodies.
Load management.
Yeah. Thank you very
right.
much.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
The NBA is basically the inmates run the asylum. It's that times 10 in the WNBA because of what I just mentioned. The merit, the talk about merit, that there is at least still some meritocracy in the NBA. The WNBA, I'm talking myself back into your position, Steve. Its foundation is not necessarily merit. Now, there are players who get more playing time, and yes, there are players that are better than others, but as a whole, nobody's has been watching the WNBA by and large. So therefore, the whole thing is just a subsidy. It cannot run itself. It cannot be financially supported in and of itself. And you're asking all of these players who came into that environment to recognize that this is actually a meritocracy now. And she could be, as I said before, the rising tide that lifts all boats. You're asking a whole pool of players to put that aside. I don't know. I think the fraternal kind of instinct amongst players in like the NFL and the NBA, I just don't think that exists in the WNBA.
Just for the sake of argument, because I want to hear how you'd respond.
All right, let me get your point in because I got to mention relief factor before. Yeah. So I want to make sure we get to this point first. Pain is your body's way of letting you know something might be wrong. And a lot of times we take drugs to mask that pain, and they can help mask the pain, but can come with side effects, and they don't address the underlying cause of a lot of your chronic pain, which is too much inflammation in your joints, and that's where Relief Factor comes in. It is drug-free, but it was created as a supplement by physicians who can prescribe drugs, but they wanted to see, hey, is there a way to go after the pain causing the inflammation causing the pain without the side effects? And that's what Relief Factor looks to do. Hey, it's not a panacea. It's not 100%. But over the years, and it's been over 1 million people have tried this 3-week quick start. Over the years, 70% of them saw such great results in 3 weeks or less that they stuck around with the product long term. So what do you have to lose for $20? See if you don't see a difference in your pain in 3 weeks or less when you go to relieffactor.com. Again, head over to relieffactor.com. Get the 3-week quick start. It's just $20 for the 3-week quick start at relieffactor.com.
Just
all right, Todd.
For both of you really quick, just for the sake of argument, Riley Gaines, no one had heard of Riley Gaines. She's an NCAA swimmer, just like most people have not heard of Ainsley Erzin, a soccer and a track player outside. What if, just for the sake, we've rightly been parsing all the worst case scenarios because they're all out there. What if she went full Riley Gaines at the outset? Riley Gaines has become Joan of Arc in a short period of time. It would be on if she was willing to do that. See, I'm just excited. What if? What if?
I think that's the only way she doesn't assimilate. Because it requires that. That's why I said requires that level of anointing, or another term we could use is conviction, if you prefer. It requires your conviction that I am here to change the system.
Yeah.
That I'm not just here to play basketball. If she's there, if she thinks they're going to just let her play basketball, she'll be selling rainbow jerseys. Okay, and doing Pride Month videos within 2-3 years.
Don't disagree with you.
Tops, that'll happen, guaranteed. They're not going to let her just be a neutral basketball player. She's straight, white, from Iowa. She's in there with a bunch of people that represent political constructs. They're going to make her assimilate, or she's going to have to assimilate them. Someone's God is going to be served in every situation.
Don't threaten me with a good time, Steve Deace. Let's do this.
You see, I think there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity for Caitlin, but there's also an opportunity for the WNBA I already talked about. This is an opportunity to take your game to a whole new level and focus on playing basketball. If I'm Caitlin's dad right now or mentoring Caitlin, I wouldn't say don't go in there with any political agenda. Go in there, play basketball, win basketball games, and be the best role model you can. That means if you get married while you're a player, you be the best wife that you can be, and you show what a real marriage looks like. If you end up being a mom while you're a WNBA player, you be the best mom you can be, and what does motherhood look like? Be that role model for all these girls that are looking to you. Don't go in with, this is who I am and this is my political agenda. Go in there to win basketball games. That's what got you to this point. You've got there with a great ability. Go in, and she's had all these pressure. I mean, we say she hadn't had this pressure at the University of Iowa. The heck she hasn't. All these people are focused. She was in a fishbowl yesterday, all over the world, a fishbowl. And she comes out of it. And I watched the post-game interviews where she was, in my opinion, a role model, giving credit away to her coaches, to her team, talking about these little kids again, these little girls. Stay focused on that. Don't buy into this other garbage. I would not do that. I know that you're going into a tough situation. Rise above it. And then you will be remembered because you will have been truly unique in this sport.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, man.
Good to have you back. We're going to stick around. We'll say goodbye to Paul, to Bob. It's been so long, I forgot your name. I'm Steve. How are you?
Yeah, Paul, you get me, confused. The guy wrote 2/3
We're going to say
of the New
goodbye
Testament.
to Bob. We're going to stick around and do overtime for Blaze TV subscribers. For the rest of you, we'll see you tomorrow. Until then, Romans 8:28.